Welcome to the podcast, everybody. I'm Stephen Rockwood, your host, and I am here with Terry Bean, who is a growth coach and keynote speaker. Terry, it's great to have you. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing fantastic. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to have this conversation with you, Stephen.
I'm excited too. I mean, we haven't had too much time to talk, so this will be a big learning experience for me as well as all the listeners here. And I'm just excited to hear your story and just kind of learn about what you've been doing and just any lessons you've learned along the way that you can teach us and that we can learn from would be awesome.
Love it. Yeah, man. Happy to share and point you in the right direction on things I know a little bit about. I'm a big fan of teaching and educating and inspiring and mostly just serving other folks. So that should give you a nice little rundown.
That is a beautiful rundown. Well, let's do this. How about you give us a 1 to 3 minute little intro to who is Terry Bean and how you got here?
Yeah, so today's Terry Bean, as you mentioned, does a lot of business growth coaching and keynote speaking. And it started back about 20 years ago. I was messing around with a bunch of networking on LinkedIn, connecting with people all over the globe. And one day, about early 2006, I started to realize that all of these great connections didn't give a rip about Detroit. And Detroit was having a real tough time. And I realized that if we're going to move Detroit forward, it's going to have to start with the entrepreneurial class. And there's going to be a lot of accidental entrepreneurs because cuts were coming, layoffs, job loss, whatever. So I started a group called Motor City Connect. It was a business networking organization. I had about 10 years of running different networking groups, but I never found one that I liked. And at the time, none of them encouraged online connecting and real world connecting. So, like dipping the chocolate in the peanut butter, I made those things happen in a hyper local fashion here in the Detroit area.
Perfect.
That led to speaking. How do you network? How do you connect with people? How do you build relationships? How do you build your business? How do you leverage social media? Speaking led to coaching because people would say, that was great. How do we get more of you? And I'd say, hire me to speak. And they're like, there's three of us. We're not paying you to come speak to three of us.
Fair.
Well, that led to coaching. And that's been the majority of the path and the journey that I've been on since. I think I got my first check for speaking in 2008. So going on 17 years. It's almost old enough to vote, man.
That is impressive. Well, that leads me into a question then, as far as because you still do keynote speaking now, right?
I do.
All right. So, how has keynote speaking changed since 2008 as far as finding these gigs and being hired and like reaching out to people? Has it changed a lot or is it pretty similar?
It's changed a bit. I don't know that it's a lot, but it has changed. I've got friends of mine that have stopped leading with Keynote and started leading with other things they do. And I'll tell you a couple of things that have changed. Obviously, there's a lot more presenting from your butt than there ever was before because we can present just like this.
Yep.
And not every speaker brings the same energy to a room. And what I mean by that is there's two types. One brings the energy, fills the room, and doesn't matter how many people are there. The other type of speaker needs to suck the energy out of the room to feed it back to them. And they're dead in the water for virtual events. They can't do it because a virtual event, as you know, much like you are talking to the wall in front of you, that's what I'm doing too.
Yep.
So that's a huge difference. The other big difference is event organizers are a little less likely to take in unsolicited responses. They want members to share people they've seen, or they keep rebooking people they've booked in the past because it's a known commodity.
Okay.
So that makes it a little bit more challenging. It's like, remember when you graduated from college and you were like, I need a job? And they'd say, oh, yeah, we'd love to hire you, but you don't have any experience,
Yeah.
right? It's that
Yep.
circular argument all over again.
All right. Well, I have a quick story on that because I got lucky out of college. I taught tennis for 8 years, and while I was in college, so I graduated high school 2010, and I taught tennis from 2010 until 2018. So when I was in school from 2010 to 2014, I was teaching, and then I would substitute in the men's league every once in a while when someone wouldn't show up or got sick or the snow was too much for them. So I met all these like older dudes who, some of them were retired, some of them they were probably like 50 plus for the most part. And
Ancient fossils.
yeah, just fossils. Yeah, I mean, it's incredible. I couldn't believe they could even move and hit a tennis ball. No, they kicked my ass most of the time. But one of them, when I graduated, was like, "Hey, you graduated with like marketing or business, right?" And I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "Well, I was on the Chamber of Commerce, and one of my friends owns a marketing company up here. They're hiring a Twitter technician and a marketing manager. Like, would you want to apply?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." So I talked to the CEO. He like gave me his contact info, and I went in for an interview. And the Twitter technician position was like a 5 or 10 hour a week part-time type deal. And then the marketing manager position was actually like a full-time job where you're actually doing marketing for that company. So it was like their only marketing person, essentially. And they told me, like, we don't want to hire a kid out of college for this position, so we're just going to talk to you about the Twitter one. Well, 3 hours later, because I was in my interviews for over 3 hours, they just kept tossing me from room to room. And then they just bring me back in. They're like, "All right, so you clearly got the job if you haven't guessed yet." And I was like, "Yeah, I figured I got it." And they're like, "But not the Twitter one. We talked, and we want you to have the marketing manager. We think you're a good fit." So just being able to like talk your way in and kind of show that confidence was just a great way to be like, "Hey, I can do this job." Like, yes, I applied for this smaller one, but really, like, I can do the other one. So,
Love that story. That's awesome and good for you because you're right. Communicating your value proposition and doing it in a way that actually resonates with your audience is such an important tip in building relationships and growing your business and finding a new job. So you obviously hit the right notes during that conversation and it landed pretty well.
yeah, it landed well. And it's just like a job interview is kind of the same as a speech, in my opinion, where you want to prepare a little bit, but you need to also be on the fly where you might, something might happen or you might feel the energy in the room kind of shift when you switch topics and you're like, all right, I'm going to I'm going to focus more on this because everyone seemed more engaged when I was talking about that. And then I switched gears and I kind of felt the room go, like they kind of backed up.
Absolutely. And I love that. And I like that you equated it to public speaking because it absolutely happens. The best public speakers may use the same slide deck, but the message that comes out of their mouth, you could watch the same presentation 10 times in a row, and it'll be a different presentation every time based on who's in the room and how it's going.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess in your experience, if you had some advice for someone that was just starting out in public speaking or keynote speaking and they wanted to do it, as a job or a side hustle or just as a part of their services, what would you recommend? Just some like quick pro tips from someone who's been there.
Well, don't do what I did. Don't end up with 55 different presentation decks in your laptop. That's really hard to market.
Fair.
So I would pick two, right? Go deep on two very different topics. They can interrelate or intersect, but pick things that you're really passionate about, that you can become knowledgeable on, and then create kind of a sell sheet. And think about that sell sheet, not from your perspective and what you're trying to get, but what you're trying to give the audience. Because the key takeaways, how they're going to feel, what they're going to learn, what impact it's going to make on their lives, that's what matters. And then recognize that a lot of times you're speaking to an event planner or organizer, and their goal is to make sure that they have a successful event. So your message needs to incorporate how you're going to make them look like a rock star for choosing you.
Fair. Yeah, no, that's super, super good advice. I like that. Yeah, especially that last piece is really good. Just kind of make them feel like they made the right choice is
And
always
then, oh,
important.
by the way, deliver, right?
Yeah, you gotta
Talk
deliver.
once you get there.
Yeah, for sure. I saw somewhat related, but a little unrelated. One of my connections on LinkedIn, he's a public speaker, and he made a post a week or two ago about like the speaker high when you step off stage and how you kind of get like that dopamine drop. Uh, Is that something you experience after doing like a good presentation? Like when you felt it went really well, once you get to the back or once you get to the room, do you feel like, oh my God, all my energy's gone? Or do you have a different experience with that?
I'll tell you what, the first time in 2007 when I got called in to present to 100 people, at one point during the talk, I was literally jumping up and down. I had so much adrenaline coursing through my veins that I was like as excited as I was when I was 4 years old getting jelly beans at Easter,
Yeah.
right? I mean, it was the same level. Nowadays, they talk about the runner's high. I don't think I ever experienced that either. And
Yeah.
so it's not that there's a drop by any significance, right? And I have enough energy to fill the room 17 times over.
Yeah.
So there's no drop there, but I'm still excited to be able to share. The key thing, though, is I'm never there for me. I'm always there for the audience. So their aha moments, their excitement, their engagement, their takeaways is the piece that really matters to me. I'm just there as a conduit to provide some knowledge and wisdom that they can use to better their lives.
I like it. All right, I'm going to tell a quick story about my kind of keynote slash public speaking start, and then I'd like to hear yours as far as like how you got your foot in the door. So I'll just tell mine real quick because mine's super short and kind of a goofy way to do it. So that company I talked about earlier that hired me as their marketing manager, it was in a small town, and it was an old town, so most of the people living there were grandparents, and they lived on their own, and a lot of them were pretty bored because there wasn't a lot to do. It's Minnesota, 6 months out of the year they're up north, like you can't go outside, it's freezing, it's -20, so they're just housebound. And they started community ed classes, but no one up there knew that much about technology and computers and stuff. So they hired me to just come in and start doing community ed classes. And for the first four, they were like very general topics: how to use eBay, how to start an Etsy store. And on the first one, I got there and it was how to use eBay. And the first question was, how do I log into my computer? And the second question was, how do I activate my email on my computer? And I was like, all right, well, I made an entire slide deck about eBay, but I guess we're going to focus on how to use a computer today. So I did the first four, did not go to plan whatsoever based on the audience. No one there was there to learn that specific thing. They were either there because they had questions about something else and they just figured, hey, this guy will know what to do. Or they were there because they were bored and they just wanted to learn something new, which is honestly my favorite thing to do as well. Is when I'm bored, I just like to learn something new. So I like to cater to those people, but that was kind of my start, was just I am going in with a plan and I'm going to wing the whole thing because nothing is going to plan because no one is there for the reason we all thought they were. So that was kind of my initial start. And then obviously with like coaching tennis and stuff, I had a lot of public speaking in a way, but it's a lot more, one-on-one or group of 10 kids or something. So that was my entry point. I'd like to hear kind of how how you got your first couple gigs, or just like what kickstarted you to get there.
All right, so it was 20 years ago, probably this summer. It'll be 20 years.
Okay.
And about now, I don't know if it was a bet or an idea or a conversation, but whatever. I had two friends of mine. All three of us were on LinkedIn, and we decided to take very different paths. One was going to connect with everybody and anybody. One was going to keep their network intentionally tight with only people they knew, and one was going to actually do the work to see whether or not somebody was worth connecting with. And I was the anybody and everybody sample.
Okay.
And 3 months after this process started, the lady of the three of us said, "Hey, I think more people need to know how to use LinkedIn. You seem to be doing it pretty well." I was probably at 700 connections at that point, and
Yeah.
evidently back then size matters. And so I gave a LinkedIn training to about 35, 40 people. And so that was one of the first times since college. And to be fair, I have a master's degree in communications
Okay.
that came with a graduate assistantship where I taught public speaking to incoming freshmen.
Okay.
But it was really the first time since college that I'd ever really done any public speaking outside of the 10-minute networking pitch at networking groups. And so it was interesting to actually prepare a talk. The next time, aside from some training at a company I worked for, was that event that I told you about, the bouncing up and down.
Yeah.
I got asked to speak at a really large business incubator here in town on the topic of networking because I had built that networking group. I had built some authority on the topic, and they were having an event. Two of my friends who were also in that networking group said, "There's only one guy for you to talk to. Have Terry come in."
Yeah.
And so we did that. And I tell speakers all the time, if you want to speak more, all you have to do is speak more, right?
Fair.
If you do a good job presenting, somebody in the audience or some buddies in the audience are going to invite you to come speak at their event.
Yeah.
And so it's like a daisy chain effect. You just keep speaking and you get more places to speak. And eventually, at some point, you have to start saying, yeah, I would love to come speak to your group. Do you have a budget for speakers?
Yeah.
Because it would be really easy to speak for free for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
And don't tell my wife, but I would gladly speak for free for the rest of my life because I like the impact.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, I'll make sure she doesn't get this podcast. I'll hide it. I'll put
she
a,
listen,
a
dude.
wife filter.
If I'm on it, I can assure you she will not watch it. She
She's heard
gets
your
so
voice
tired of
enough.
my bullshit.
She's like, I hear that voice 23 hours a day. You can have him for that hour.
I am good. I am good without that noise. Yeah, no, it's actually fine. We've been together a minute, so she's definitely used to it at this point.
Fair. All right. So this brings me to a question that I actually had for you when you first signed up to be a podcast guest. I thought of it and I forgot about it until this very moment. So, what is the most random opportunity that you've gotten from LinkedIn, whether you took it or not? What's the most like just random call you've gotten or random offer?
Well, I mean, I'm going to have to go all the way back to a conversation I had at 11 o'clock this morning. For those not time stamping, that's 2.5 hours ago.
It's a long time ago.
And yeah, it's forever. And it's so funny because people will send me messages. If you have an audience or a following, you get hit on all the time, especially in the coaching space. Everybody wants to monetize or promote your podcast, or everybody wants to be your VA, or everybody wants to help you find more leads. And
Mm-hmm.
this one was different. And I just accepted the invite and scheduled, but they're doing a magazine. They have an online digital magazine
Okay.
that's got like 5 million subscribers and followers,
Jeez.
and they wanted to interview me. And so evidently today's call was the pre-interview, and
Okay.
so they can figure out what the actual questions to ask are in the written interview that they're sending me at some point. And I don't know. I haven't heard if there's a sales pitch yet, so I'm
Yeah.
really curious to see what happens next. But after that conversation, which went interesting, I went to their website and was checking it out, and I'm like, huh, there's actually some stuff going on here.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe this isn't craptacular. We'll see what happens
Yeah.
next.
That's fun. Yeah, I love when stuff like that happens. Especially working. I worked for a construction company for 4 years, so there's tons of just random awards and certificates that they just award you. So yeah, it's funny. You get so many people messaging you like, "Hey, you've been elected to this award." Then you have to look like, how much do I have to pay for that? Am I actually winning an award or am I buying a trophy that someone offered me?
Yeah, the who's who in America. Be on that list.
Yeah.
You can show up and it'll build your credibility. Only cost you 2,500 bucks. Wait, what?
Yeah, I know it's so funny. And one of them here in Minneapolis, I don't know if it's a nationwide thing, but there's a Minneapolis St. Paul one, and it's the Fast 50. So it's the 50 fastest growing companies, but it's only the people that pay to be on there. So I'm like, it doesn't. You're the 50 fastest of those goofy enough to pay $4,000.
Exactly right. I got a note from a PR company recently that wanted big question about my work that USA Today wanted to know about and schedule a call to learn more. And it's a $4,000 advertorial.
Yeah,
I'm like, I can't imagine that I'm going to get $4 worth of business
yeah,
as a result of that file. So no thanks.
yeah.
But there's just so many things, and if we don't take a moment to ask about the fine print, because they usually hide it in plain sight,
Hmm.
um, it's really easy to get taken and spend money the wrong way on the wrong things.
Yep. Yeah. No. Exactly. And that's one of the reasons I do like consulting and working with like family companies or older companies that they've been around so long that they've done traditional marketing all their life. So these things all seem pretty normal to them. But the way the landscape's changed is like none of this is normal. Like buying
Or
trophies
effective.
or effective. Exactly. Like buying trophies doesn't really do much for you, especially when most people, like other business owners, know what goes into buying that trophy. So that you're like, we are this. And then the company you're advertising to is like, all right, cool. We could have been that too. We just didn't want to spend $10,000.
I love that. I absolutely, yeah, it's like a cautionary tale every day.
Yeah, exactly. So that's one thing I do like is I like to be able to point people in that direction. Like, hey, don't do those. They're not worth your time or your money or anyone's time really, because the only person that gets anything out of it is the person making the award, and then you don't get anything out of it because there's no real value. There's nothing that ties back to being like a really good company, or there's nothing that highlights like a milestone that you reached. Whereas if you just use your own marketing and you can be like, hey, we completed $10 million worth of client projects this year. That's a lot more effective than we have a trophy that says we're a top 500 company in St. Paul, Minneapolis.
For sure.
But yeah, so one thing I've always been curious about is how you kind of began pricing your keynote speaking. So you said that you asked them for a budget, but did you have in your mind like I'm not going to go lower than this amount if they offer me $500? It's an absolute no. But or was it just like I'm just going to get paid until I decide I want to make more than that and then I'll turn those down?
That's such an incredible question, Stephen, and it's possibly the bane of my existence. I bet I delivered, and I had a partner that I delivered a lot with. We did co-presentation. It was a ton of fun. We had a blast.
Okay.
And I mean, there were days we would deliver 3 talks in a day,
Yeah.
right? I mean, we had a driving all over Detroit area. It was wild. Um, but I bet we delivered 60 talks before I even thought to ask if somebody had a budget, which is way too long, right?
Yeah.
You don't need 60. You need some, don't get me wrong. You
Yeah.
need some, but you don't need that many. And the first check that I received, and it was on my wall, written the tear off pay stub portion. I wrote professional speaker on it and plastered on my vision board. It was
Nice.
$600, and I split it with him, and it was like an hour talk for a $300 million automotive supplier.
Yeah.
So dumb,
That's
so
crazy.
dumb.
Yeah, so you basically
Um,
got to get lunch and a drink on your way back home, and half your paycheck was gone.
Yeah, I couldn't have the second drink, couldn't afford it. And so that was bad. And it took me a long time to get used to asking what that budget was to make sure that people had one, and then to decide whether or not I wanted to accept what they had to offer. I had a situation earlier this year, a referral from a great partner of mine
Hmm.
to a former client of his wealth management firm, 50 some people, wanted a 45-minute presentation. And I think because it was him, I gave them a pretty low number, like $1,200.
Yeah.
It was a virtual talk. I didn't have to go anywhere or do anything.
Okay.
And they pushed back on that immediately, said that's way out of our budget.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, what did you have in mind? And they said one to
Oh my
$400.
goodness.
And they were right. It was way out of line.
Yeah.
And I was not willing to accept the $400
Yeah.
because I was insulted, right?
Yeah.
That company makes a boatload of money. The information they wanted from me was going to help their entire team make a whole boatload of money more.
Yeah.
And that was a real lesson that I had learned. It's not about how much do you want to earn or make, it's how much value are they going to create from hearing you speak.
Yeah.
And that's one of the ways to really price your talk. And then
Yeah.
the other tip I'll share on this topic is three price points:
Okay.
speaker fee, nonprofit speaker fee, which is less, could be half,
Yeah.
honorarium. Absolute bare nuts minimum
Okay.
that you will accept,
Yeah.
right? And so I look at it as trying to equate that honorarium to, like, what's my hourly rate and how do I either double it or at least not forget that it's not just the time presenting that we should be counting,
Mm-hmm.
but it's the time preparing the deck. It's the time, if you're a practicer, that you spend practicing. It's the time to get there and back,
Yeah.
right? So that's the honorarium
Yeah,
fee.
no, I'm glad you mentioned that because I actually was talking to a photographer earlier today, just kind of giving her some ideas on how to kind of grow on LinkedIn and kind of showcase what she does. And one of the things I mentioned to her was kind of show your pricing, but not necessarily how much you charge a client, but how much money it costs just to get yourself there. And by that, I mean your camera, your lens. That's 10,000. Like my camera and lens, that's $10,000 right there, just for the two pieces of equipment that I need on every shoot. So there's
Yep.
a $10,000 like fixed cost of me coming there. And then there's all the experience you have and all the stories that you're bringing from your own experience and the lessons that you've learned. Like those weren't free. Like you didn't just wake up one day and you're like, all right, all these things happened to me last night when I was dreaming, and now I can talk about it. Like you have a lifetime of experience that kind of builds up to what you're going to talk about and how you talk, and that's what makes you a good speaker. So I think that like having those, even if you're not explicitly telling the people you're talking to, like, hey, you're getting $50,000 worth of Terry right now for 1,200. But realistically, they are. You know, they're getting $50,000 worth of what brought you to them, and then they're only paying a small fee for that. So that's one thing I like to stress.
I love that approach, Stephen. I've not used that before, but you can bet that I will at some point soon because I think there's a ton of value and it's a great way to kind of show that behind the scenes thing
Yeah.
that most people forget about, right? It's like that old joke about the plumber being called in to fix the leaky pipe, right?
Hmm.
And whether it's on a ship or whatever version you've heard, but the joke is that he gets there, he walks over, he bangs on the pipe with his plumber's wrench, and he drops off a bill for $2,000.
Yeah.
And they said, "What is this? Can you itemize this bill? This is crap. You were here for 2 minutes and
Yeah.
banged on a pipe." And they said, "All right, well, here. It was $1 to bang on the pipe. It was $1,999 to know where to bang."
Yeah, exactly. And $1,999 to not make it worse.
Yeah,
Because you
100%.
could hire me for $1 and I will make it worse.
People mess it up, man.
You're going to need two
Being
plumbers.
extreme. Yeah. I love it, love it, love it.
But yeah, so that's actually a good joke too, and that's actually a good story because I've actually heard that story before. I think at my old company we would use that because we were a digital marketing agency and we'd sell marketing, and what we would pitch was like, yeah, our technician's only in your platform for 20 minutes, maybe once a week, but you're spending $5,000 on ads. Do you want to pay someone who knows what they're doing, even if it only takes them 20 minutes a week? Or do you want to pay someone who has no idea what they're doing and they spend 10 hours tweaking stuff and your results are still worse?
That's reality right there. I had a friend of mine that had their house resided and they were renting the house, so it wasn't even their choice. Their landlord picked the cheapest, shittiest company
Yeah.
because he met this guy who was a painter who said he could do it.
Yep.
And they spent 6 weeks, 7 weeks to do this 6-day
Oh my
job.
goodness.
And then the legitimately the guy that he hired got arrested at the house. This is with neighbors, so I could see it all going down.
That is amazing.
And then 5 weeks later, the landlord hired a new team to come and finish the job.
Yeah.
And that team banged it out in 6 days in the middle of January,
Oh my goodness.
right? In Michigan, where it's not as cold as Minnesota.
Oh,
So
it's
don't
still
let me try
cold.
and
Oh,
trip
it's
you.
still cold.
But it ain't summer.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not summer here. And so, but what a moral to the story. Like that second team had to rip off every ounce of siding that first team put up
Yeah.
because it was all wrong. And it still took them the original estimated time of the job.
Yeah.
I feel bad for that tenant, and I still feel bad for the landlord, even though the landlord's a numbskull that chose the team in the first place.
Yeah. Well, my marketing brain makes me want to make a joke about the first one who got arrested on site because then his next commercial can be his mugshot and it can say, "Our prices are illegally low." And they're set.
That would be interesting. I want to see how that campaign. Would you boost that, or would you put it as ad dollars? How do you know the difference? What to do with that?
Yeah, that's. I think we'd start organic and see what the community thinks, and then we'll start boosting it out. but
Fantastic.
but let's see. I think I had one more question for you before I let you go, and I think I told you this earlier, but I would love to have you back on the show. So if anyone's listening and they have any questions for Terry that they'd like to have him answer on the next show, please put them in the comments wherever you're seeing this, and I'd gladly have Terry back because I'm very much enjoying our conversation, and I feel like we haven't even scratched the tip of the iceberg here with your knowledge and all the stuff you can tell us. So,
Every time. Thank you.
of course, but I just want to open it up if you had any stories or any fun happenings that you've had in your experience that you just wanted to share. If there's anything that comes to mind, it can be public speaking, it can be mindset related, coaching, whatever comes to mind that you feel like has some sort of value or is just a fun story.
I got two. Can I share them both?
Please do.
One's practical and one's like practically makes me look foolish. So I'll share the lesson first and I'll share the laughter second
All
because
right.
why not leave them laughing?
Sounds
So
perfect.
number one, as I mentioned, I ran networking groups for a long time. And the biggest mistake that I see most networkers make is thinking that if they're in front of the group and want to give their ask or give their 60-second commercial or request how people can help, whatever you want to call it, people are too broad, too general. They think if they throw out a big, huge net, they're going to get more fish back.
Hmm.
Here's the challenge. If you've ever gone fishing and weren't really selective about the type of bait you were using, the type of fish you were trying to catch, you quickly realize that by throwing out a big net and catching all the fish, that some fish taste like shit.
Fair.
Now, the same thing is true when you're fishing for leads. Not all leads or referrals are created equally. So do your network a favor and get really specific about the type of person, their role, their company, the job they do, where they're located, what their title is. The more specific you can be, the better your networking results are going to be. And here's my example. The group I ran, we had multiple different meetings throughout the month. Some meetings I'd have 25 people, some I'd have 45, some I'd have 65. One time I was in a room with 12 people,
Okay.
right? So very small by our standards. I was a little disappointed, but and it changed how I think about networking in this moment. A gentleman that was doing consulting, specifically like Six Sigma process improvement consulting, speaking to a group of 12 people, he said very plainly, I would like to meet the director of admissions for the University of Michigan. In this room of 12 people, by the way, he was one, I was two, so there were 10 people really.
Fair.
I guess we're still people. There was 12 people. Um,
We count.
he asked for this. One person says, oh, I can connect you to that person. I know them well. Another person says, I'm in the alumni group on LinkedIn. I can certainly introduce you to the person who's the moderator. I don't necessarily know them, but I know of them.
Hmm.
A third person said, I don't know the director of admissions at the University of Michigan, but I do know the director of admissions at the University of Detroit. Would that be of interest? To wit, the guy said, of course that would be of interest. And I had just happened to finish doing a presentation 3 weeks before with the director of alumni relations at Michigan State
Oh
University.
my goodness.
So this one ask yielded a positive response from like 40% of the room,
Yeah.
right? And so because he was clear, he was concise, and he was hyper specific, his results were far better than damn near any networking ask I've seen in the 20 years I've been doing this.
Fair.
So there's your lesson.
I like it.
All right.
That's a good one. That is a good one. I'm going to steal the spotlight for a moment because I have a story similar to that, actually. That's not mine, it's my grandpa.
Okay.
So, my grandpa was a professor, a math professor, and he went to a United Nations meeting and just to watch. And he was sitting there and he started talking to the guy next to him. And like an hour or two went by, and the guy's like, hey, do you want to work for us? And he's like, who's us? And he's like, oh, I'm in charge of education at the United Nations. I'd love to hire you. And then my grandpa became the guy that brought math programs to underdeveloped countries. So my mom and her sisters grew up all across the world because they were just going from country to country making math programs. And then my grandpa would teach the people how to teach it, and then he'd move on. So, kind of the same deal. He was just in the right room at the right time and talked to the right person.
And said the right thing.
Exactly.
Right? And said the right thing. That is so cool. Great story.
Yeah,
Great
yeah.
answer.
So
Thank you.
that was fun, and I feel like that's probably what gives me confidence when I just talk my way into stuff. Is I'm like, if he can work for the United Nations, I have that in my blood somewhere. I can BS my way into something.
Channel that. Oh, yeah. I love it. I love it.
All right, I think you had one more story for me before I
One more story.
before I.
I'm speaking at a local chamber of commerce. There's 120 people in the room. It's those round tables, right? 8 to 10 people at a table. There's a bunch of them full. And I've been wearing glasses for probably 3 or 4 years at this time,
Okay.
which means that I didn't always wear
Yep.
glasses, right? So in my presentations, my decks, I don't have a lot of words on them, so there's no need to read. I know what the image is, I know what the story is or what it could be, and so I don't have to read anything. So I'm not wearing my glasses. I'm up in front of this group. I'm 30 minutes in, and all of a sudden, in the back part of the room, straight ahead, but on the other side of the room, at the end of the table, there's a lady holding up a cocktail napkin
Yeah.
with some words on it. And I'm still telling my story, doing my talk, doing my thing, but I'm now squinting, trying to read what the hell this note says.
Yeah.
And now I'm curious enough that I'm moving toward her and on my way to see what happens. I'm still flapping my gums, not missing a beat,
Yeah.
but I get to a point where I can actually read the cocktail napkin. I laugh out loud, turn around, zip up my zipper,
That's amazing.
and go back to the front of the room. Now I have to let everybody in on the joke because they watched this whole thing unfold.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, miss, what's your name? And she tells me her name's Sandy. And I said, I just want to publicly acknowledge Sandy for her class and demeanor and kindness in letting me know that my zipper was down in front of all of you for a
Yeah.
while. And
That's
then like everybody just busts out cracking up.
that is
It was a moment, and I still have friends that were in that room that every time I present now, did you check your fly?
yeah. Terry the Fly Bean.
I might just go by Superfly, man.
Superfly.
I think that would be sweet.
That's so funny. Speaking of Superfly, I don't know if you ever watch wrestling, like professional wrestling, like
Sure,
WWE,
Jimmy Snuka.
WCW. One of
Yeah.
my favorite moments of all time is really old from WCW or ECW, and someone has a sign that says Goldberg eats corn the long way, which is the most goofy phrase ever. But the guy wrestling saw the sign, and you see him laugh, and then he moves the action towards there so that the camera is on this sign for like 30 seconds, and you can just see him trying not to burst out laughing. And then he like laughs and runs back to the ring. But that is one of my favorite things ever because he clearly noticed it, started laughing. He's like, you know what? Everyone needs to see this. Let me figure out how to get this center.
I lived in Minnesota from 82 to 89,
Okay.
which for those old heads like me, you'll remember that was when Hogan was in the AWA.
Yep.
So I had like elementary school buds that were delivering newspaper to Kenny Patera and Hulk Hogan
Yeah.
and that whole thing. Mean Gene Okerlund was a member at the country
Oh,
club that my stepdad was a member
oh
of.
my goodness.
I mean, it was a classic time right before, Vince McMahon consumed all the territory.
Yeah, that's funny. I feel like you and Mean Gene would get along great. Actually, you give me similar vibes. Funny enough, I feel like you guys would have a great podcast together.
Hey, thank you. That's high praise, man. That guy was
He
legendary.
was, yeah. Yeah, I love him. I don't know if you watched the Paul Heyman documentary that came out like a year or two ago, but if you liked old wrestling or just like enjoyed like the storytelling of it, it's so good because he's been in it since the start and he's just a manager. So he like started his own company and then started working for the Vince McMahon ones, and he brought the biggest stars in the end, like Brock Lesnar, CM Punk, all those guys. So it's kind of cool to see like his origin story, and he literally just BS'd his way in. He bought a camera from like a pawn shop and he brought it to a wrestling event and just pretended to be with the press and just walked in and just started taking pictures next to the ring until people were like, why is this kid here? And then they were like, you know what, we'll just invite him into the back, it can't hurt. And he just became friends with everyone when he was a kid because he just showed up.
It's fascinating because that's a similar story to how Bischoff got started too.
Yeah.
And it's too late to be embarrassed by this now. I just started watching the McMahon story,
Okay.
and they recorded that over like a 3-year period.
Yeah.
And during the recordings, when all the allegations about the sexual misconduct came out,
Yep.
and they're like, most of the stuff we recorded with him was before that.
Yeah.
But, and it's funny, I don't normally watch bullshit TV until like it's right before bedtime.
Yeah.
So I now find myself waking up, rewinding to where I fell asleep so I can get back into it the next night.
Oh yeah.
So it's going to take me forever to finish the series, but it's maybe next time we chat, I'll have an official update for
Yeah,
you.
that'd be perfect. Yeah, I have to watch that one still. I've not watched the Vince McMahon one, but I've watched pretty much everything on Peacock at this point on the WWE network that they brought over. I got divorced last year, so I was like just kind of on my own for the first time in a while, and I watched every WrestleMania from 1 to 30 and every Royal Rumble. Like I just watched one every night before I went to bed. So I just like made it all the way through because as a kid I didn't have cable, so I couldn't
Right.
watch the pay-per-views or Raw. So I was like, hey, I'm going to go back and watch these finally.
That's amazing. And yeah, you don't even have to tell anyone you're single. You could
Yeah,
just tell them
you could
that.
just tell them that. I know. I was at the airport, and there was two guys just randomly talking about John Cena, and I was like, "You see John Cena yesterday?" And then one of them goes, "Where's your wife?" He goes, "Oh, we got divorced." And I was like, "Of course he did."
My wife still yells at me every now and again. Fortunately, it moved to Netflix, so like Raw was always like Monday Night Football's in commercial. I'm gonna flip over to Raw,
Yeah.
and when I do it, she'd be like, "I can't stand the fact that I know so much about this."
Yeah. Hey, it's a great base for storytelling. That's why I always tell people. I was like, I grew up with wrestling. I'm a good storyteller. I feel like wrestling is part of that because that's all it is. It's just storytelling. And when you look at it from the outside, if you just watch the wrestling, it's like, okay, this is all the same for the most part. But then when you watch it and you see the build up to each thing and you realize, like, even the matches have significance within them, like the certain moves they do or something usually serve a purpose. So it's a masterful way to tell a story, and it's fun that they have so much control over how long the story is, so they can be like, oh, people are clearly engaged with this character now because we made them the bad guy, we made them the heel, let's keep it that way, and then when we switch them to the baby face and make them look good, everyone's going to be shocked.
That's it. That's it. Or to your point about Cena, wait, what?
Yeah,
Cena's heel? Holy
yeah, he turned heel like a week or
Sorry,
two ago.
spoiler alert for
I,
those of us.
I think the internet blew up with that one. I think we're okay.
Yeah, I kind of hope so. I
Yeah,
hope so.
John
Yeah,
Cena finds a way.
that's the only reason I know is because of reels. So
Yep.
yeah, that's pretty cool. But I agree. There was something about growing up in Minnesota because I lived in Michigan before moving to Minnesota,
Yeah.
and we had wrestling, big time wrestling. It was a thing. But when I got to Minnesota, it was everything.
Yeah.
Right. And again, Vince McMahon was still Vince McMahon way out on the East Coast. He hadn't crossed any boundaries. This was 2 or 3 years before WrestleMania took place.
Yeah.
And that's what sprung them everywhere, obviously.
Yep. Yeah.
Oh my God. Wow, we're
That's
absolute dorks.
we
Hey,
are.
to anybody that's still watching,
Well, I will end this, but I will go full circle one more time because we mentioned wrestling and Mall of America. And fun fact that I learned a few months ago is the first WCW wrestling event was in the Mall of America because WWF was doing a live show for the first time and WCW couldn't compete. So they were like, what do we do? And they put together a live show in 6 days, and the only venue they could figure out to nail down was the Mall of America, just the big area in the middle where they do like concerts and stuff now. So that was just a WCW ring and then just chairs.
that's amazing. Now I want a map. I want to see how that took place.
Yeah.
I assume people were just all four levels, just kind of looking over the railing.
Yeah. So yeah, it's a cool one. So I gotta find if there's like a documentary or something on that because I'd like to watch that. But I just saw it in passing on a different documentary. They like mentioned it and showed a few photos, and I was like, "What? I did not know that."
That's super cool. That's super cool.
Well, Terry, I really appreciate you hopping on with me. This was super fun and super insightful, and I'm glad we got to nerd out about wrestling a little bit too. Because I have a picture of Dwayne the Rock Johnson behind me. You can't see him because he's face down, but the old Rock, the good Rock. So,
When he had hair or not that?
I think he does. Yeah, he has one little patch going down the middle here.
Nice, 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 nice. Yeah,
but
that's awesome.
But yeah, I'd love to have you on again. So we'll keep chatting, and if anyone has any questions for Terry, feel free to connect with him on LinkedIn. Just search for Terry Bean, or if you are seeing this podcast, I'll make sure to link him in the description and any posts that I put here. And yeah, is there anything else you want to add, Terry? Anything, any big events coming up, or any sales pushes that you're offering?
I'm considering doing another coaching class. I did an 8 week program on building thought leadership, and it's 8 very distinct courses, and I'll break it down into micro learning this time as opposed to hour-long sessions like it's been in the past.
Yeah.
But I'm really interested in helping people figure out who they are, what they do, why their customers care, positioning messaging that serves them on social media and email marketing, and teaching them the tools about that. Then helping them build that mutual admiration society to further that thought leadership and extend their message, and then kind of turn themselves into their own PR agency so they can get noticed when they need to. And finally, it ends with a class on how to be a better public speaker, because you need to know how to command an audience as a thought leader. And if you don't, you're not a thought leader. So that program is, like I said, it's tickling the back of my brain right now. And so, maybe someone will say, "Hey, I really want to learn that." But those people tuned out when we were talking about wrestling. So I just
I'll,
shared that for your edification.
I'll make sure to put it in the post. He may be offering a class in the future. And then I guess one last thing, if anyone wants to get coaching from you, what's the best way to go about that? And who do you usually cater towards?
Oh, the best way to do it is reach out. Let's have a conversation. I like to make sure that you're a fit for me, and more importantly, that I'm a fit for you. The people that do well with my particular coaching are those that are high performers, driven, but overworked right now, right? They're closing in on burnout. Their to-do list is way too long. They don't have the right prioritization or the right positioning. That's really where that thought leader course even came from.
Okay.
But folks that have that motor and that drive to succeed, those are the people that I coach. A lot of times they're in financial services, they're in the insurance space, they're in the mortgage business, so service oriented. I do some work with executives in manufacturing space as well, and leaders in general. Um, those are the folks for real. And then the other coaching I do, completely different, is helping people be a better public speaker, whether they want to win the pitch competition, whether they need to land a Miss Universe crown, which I still can't believe she won, but she did. That was awesome. Whether they want to land a TEDx stage, those things, or whether they just want to be more comfortable speaking to their team.
Yeah.
So those things really matter.
Perfect. Well, Terry, like I said, appreciate you being on here. I learned a lot. I'm sure anyone listening learned a lot, whether that was about public speaking, motivation, or wrestling. But hopefully they learned something. And now they have some wrestling fun facts to go back with if they need to. So, I think it's a win all around.
Yeah. Heck yeah. It was a full-on body slam right there. I love it.
It was perfect. But all right, my friend, I will let you go, and I will definitely keep in contact with you, and definitely hope to have you on the show soon. And if you do publish that course or that coaching program that you were talking about, just let me know, and I'll make sure to let the audience know that you're available and running it.
I love it, man. Thank you very much. I appreciate you, and I'll look forward to our next interaction, Stephen. Have a great day.
You too, Terry. Thank you, my friend.
Be well.